In this video we're going to talk about camcorders, in particular Sony camcorders. What's a good camera to use for making internet videos? Well, I guess that really depends on what you're trying to do. If money is no object and you want the very, very best quality that you're going to find in a camcorder these days, it's hard to not look at the ultra high def 4K. This camera is my newest acquisition, and I'm just starting to play around with it now for my 4K productions. The quality off of this camera is better than anything I've ever seen. The picture quality is just spectacular, and I've only used it a little bit. You'll be seeing some more of my videos. I'm not going to be using this one so much for my repair videos. My repair videos I'll be using usually this camera here, and I'm going to go over these cameras and what the basics are and what the pros and cons to each type of camera is. The camera I'm actually recording this on was the HDR HC3. This is also an HDV tape based camera, just like this one. This camera uses a tape. And that's the big difference between these two cameras. These cameras here are flash based, so they take an SD card. Very convenient. SD card cameras, you can shoot your files. Take the SD card out, plug it into your computer, and you're good to go. Very convenient, very quick. This one here is also an HD based or an SD based camera, although it uses a little more expensive SD card because in order to record 4K video you've got to use one of these ultra high speed 94 megabits per second cards. They're relatively expensive, and this is the camera I use for a lot of my internet videos. The big problem with this camera is it's a CMOS based camera. The picture quality is good. There's nothing wrong with the picture quality, but it's a CMOS based camera. So I find if I'm shooting an oscilloscope or a TV screen, a CRT screen, the picture has a tendency to flicker quite badly. And because it's based on H.264 MPEG-4, it takes a while to edit. Your transitions all have to render out. It's longer to edit, even with a fast computer, and I have an extremely fast computer for editing. But it does take a little more time because it's an MPEG-4 based camera. It's a long GOP, or a long group of pictures, as they call it. That's what a GOP stands for. It takes time to render everything out. And I find that I actually get better quality if I render out as an MPEG-2 stream as opposed to re-rendering it as an MPEG-4, because when you recompress the video it tends to lose a bit of detail. So saying that, you can't go wrong with one of these. Now this camera here, this is about, I guess I've had this camera for about 10 years now. This is the HDR FX1. It's also an HDV camera. Tape goes in. It uses the good old mini DV tape. Same tape that you would have used on a DV camera, but in this case, instead of it recording as a DV type signal, it's recording it as an HDV signal format, which is an MPEG-2 intra-frame as opposed to an interframe, which again is a long group of pictures or a long GOP, but not nearly as long as MPEG-4. It's a high bandwidth camera. The bandwidth on this is 25 megabits per second, and it's close to being broadcast quality. A lot of these cameras were used for broadcast work. One of the real strengths to this camera over, say, something like this, This is point and shoot. You turn it on, you really don't have any control of anything. You get what you get. It looks okay, but you get what you get. But this is $200. This is a CCD based camera, and this one uses a 3 CCD pickup. And you've got full control, full manual control. You can manually adjust your focus, and you can manually adjust your zoom. It also has your controls on the camera itself. It's got your variable speed zoom. It's got a most important feature. Would not be without a viewfinder, a proper viewfinder. Like that. The reason for that is if you're shooting outside in the sun, you can't beat being able to put your eye up to the viewfinder and block out all the extra light when you're trying to shoot using a screen like this. And the screen on here is very good. This has got an anti-reflective coating, so it actually shows up quite well, except for in direct sunlight. In direct sunlight, when you're trying to shoot with, where are we here? It's got a color bar generator built into. When you're trying to shoot with this screen out in the bright sun, and this is actually a very good one because this is the transreflective. So when you're outside in the bright sun, the actual sunlight is reflected off of a silver panel that's in behind the monitor, so you can see it. It's okay for framing, but you're not going to focus on it. You're not going to adjust your exposure using the flip out screen when you're outside. If you're outside shooting in the sun, you got to use the eyepiece for accurate framing and accurate exposure. Now, some of the other features that this camera has, and this is what makes it a particularly good camera for anything professional that you want to do, or semi-professional. You've got zebra control, so that will tell you if you're overexposed. You've got peaking on it, which will sharpen the edges, so it makes it easy to manually focus. And you got a whole host of settings that you can set up on the camera. Just looking at this this monitor on this camera here, the magenta bar doesn't really look magenta on my viewfinder. I hope it looks okay. This is the magenta bar, and on my viewfinder here, I can see white, yellow, cyan, green. It doesn't really look magenta, yellow or red, and the blue kind of looks a little light too. So I don't know whether it's just this LCD screen on this camera or whether this camera is not registering the colors correctly. But anyway, it features a host of features that a semi-professional or a professional really needs to have on a camera. The new 4K camera that I just got, this one, also features electric viewfinder. This electric viewfinder on here is actually an OLED screen as opposed to, this is an LCD. So it's good for shooting outside, but it's not really that sharp. It's hard to focus, and that's why they have a focus zoom button that you can press, which will enlarge the picture to make focusing a little bit easier, because the dot count on this LCD is not that high. The dot count on the OLED here is very, very good. And it's very easy to auto or very easy to manual focus on this camera. It also has, just like the older HDV camera, it also has a host of manual controls. Now on the HDV camera, if I go through some of the settings, you can preset your gain. You've got 3 gain settings: low, medium, and high, and you can preset those gains on the camera. You can put it in auto gain, auto or AGC as they call it, auto gain control. Or you can put it in manual gain, and then you can have 3 separate settings, anywhere from 0, or actually anywhere from -3 dB all the way up to +18. You've also got a white balance. You can have 2 presets. You can have a preset, which is set to either indoor or outdoor, whatever you select through the menu. And then you have 2 settings, manual settings A and B, which are controlled with the 1 push button. So basically, you take a white card, put it in front of the camera, and hit your white balance button, and that will set your reference to the whatever lighting conditions you're under to that white card, and you can store 2 memories and then recall them in an instant. You've got full control of the iris, gain, shutter speed, and white balance, and it's all adjusted, well, except for the white balance, that's done through the switch here, but the gain, shutter speed, and iris is controlled through this knob. You just have to select which feature you want to change. If you want to change your iris control, you hit the iris button, and then you have a dial here that you can dial up and down the iris settings. You also have a couple buttons that you can assign for specific features. I never use that. Record review reviews the last few seconds of tape. Backlight, if you're in a backlight situation, it'll open up the it'll open up the exposure, and spotlight will, if you're filming a subject under a spotlight and you don't want to ride your video levels manually with the iris, you hit the spotlight control, and that'll close the iris down slightly so that your subject isn't overexposed or blown out. You've also got full manual control of your audio. There's an audio level control here. You can put it in auto or manual, and this particular camera does have an audio input, which is extremely important to have. So there's an audio input on here. You can plug a microphone in. Unfortunately, this is the consumerish version of the camera. There was a professional version that had XLR connectors on it. This one here just has the mini plug. So if you want to use professional microphones, you have to get there's an adapter that was available that would actually attach up on top of the hot shoe here, and it would give you your XLR inputs, and it would convert it down to the stereo mini plug. And I actually made one of those up myself when I was using this camera in the field as my production camera. I had a little box I made up with the balancing transformers in them that went to the audio input, and had my radio mic plugged in, and I could plug a corded mic in if need be, and I could mix the two of them together. Had a little mixing control on it. It was a little box I built myself for the camera. But that's basically the ultimate. If you want the ultimate in cameras for shooting, and these things you can get really reasonable now. This camera here, when it was new, it was over $5,000, and but nobody wants these. Everybody's dumping these cameras. And one of the strengths I really like about this camera, and I think I may have touched on this a minute or so ago when I was talking to you, is the speed of editing. Yes, there's that extra step where you actually have to plug the camera in through your FireWire connector into your computer, so you need to have a FireWire input on your computer, which most modern computers do have a FireWire plug or FireWire interface. You can fire up even the most basic editing software. Import your tape. When you import your tape, every time you press the start and stop button, it actually creates a new scene. So if you've got a 1 hour tape, it takes you an hour to capture it on the computer. Put your tape in, capture your tape onto the computer. While you're capturing the tape, go have lunch or do something else. When you come back, your tape is all captured. It's ready to start editing. The real strength to filming in HDV is because it's a low compression format. It's MPEG-2. The quality of the picture is excellent, but the real strength to editing in MPEG-2 is, at least with the editing software I'm using, and I'm using Pinnacle Studio. I'm using Studio 14 and Studio 18. There is no rendering. It is instantaneous output. So I can blast through a production that was shot on HDV. I can cut the thing together. There's no waiting for titles to render. There's no waiting for transitions to render. It's all done in real time because the compression ratio is very low. Computer doesn't need a lot of power to edit this together. Even when I do my final output and click the Make Movie button and render it out, it renders out very quickly. Whereas when I'm shooting something in MPEG-4, I can, if I've got a long production that I'm doing, well, I can start it rendering at night and go to bed, and hopefully it's not going to crash in the night, and I'm going to have a production when I'm wake up in the morning. Whereas with this one, I can start it rendering, and so if it's an hour-long production, well, 40 minutes later, the whole thing is done. It's ready to go. If that, I mean, it renders out in real time, so it's a real time saver as far as rendering out the picture goes. Now, saying that, it is not quite as high a resolution as some of the other cameras. HDV was a 1080 format, but the resolution was not full HD. It was 1440 by 1080, which is still a high definition format, but it's not the same resolution as the full HD cameras. Full HD cameras, like this little one here, is 1920 pixels by 1080. So under ideal conditions, you would expect that this one might give a little sharper picture. I don't know whether you see it or not on the video when they're output or not, but technically a full HD camera will give a slightly sharper picture, slightly, than this one. But now, to go to the ultimate, if you want to go to the ultimate in cameras, there's the ultimate in cameras right now, at least in the affordable cameras. What sets this camera apart from most of the others? Well, the resolution. You have that option of shooting in 4K. You also have full manual control, iris, gain, shutter. It's adjusted through this dial here. You've got a manual focus or zoom ring, and you have to select whether you want to focus or zoom. I find that I'm leaving the camera always in manual focus. Again, as a professional cameraman for years when I was in the production business, that's all that was used was manual focus. I have other cameras that I've had over the years that you have no autofocus. It's manual and that's it. There is no option for it. So I learned on manual focus, and I really like this ability on this one, especially when you're using the little electric viewfinder at the back, the OLED screen. And what I found on this unit here, the easiest way to focus a camera like this, it does have the focus magnifier, just like the HDV camera. You can press the button, it'll let you touch the screen, it'll zoom in on a specific portion, or you can just zoom in on the center portion by pressing the button 2 or 3 times. It has 2 different steps. I find what's even easier than that, than using the focus magnifier, I guess if you want to quickly focus on a wide shot or something that's close and you're all the way back, that might help. But I find the easiest way to focus this camera and make sure that you're absolutely dead on, to turn the digital zoom on. I find the easiest way to focus this camera is to zoom in all the way, go right into the digital. Now you're magnifying the pixels, and then focus it manually. You get your pictures dead on accurate, and then zoom back out. That's the way I found is the easiest way to focus this camera. Not bother relying on the focus magnifier here, which you can zoom in and you can shuttle around the picture. It's kind of I think it's kind of a gadget. You can go 4 times. You can magnify up to 4 times for focusing, but I find it's just as easy. Just zoom all the way in, get into the digital zoom range, focus it manually, zoom back out. Now you're focused. You can zoom in on your subject and you'll stay in focus. That way, if you want to, especially if you want to do pull focus, where you want to focus on a subject and then take them out of frame and then zoom in on the background and start your recording and pull back and your subject comes into focus as they enter the frame, makes it very easy to do that. Anyway, if you're looking for the ultimate camera, this is the one to get. But again, this for shooting internet and YouTube videos, it's kind of overkill. I'm going to be using this in some of my productions that I've got planned. It won't necessarily be used to make YouTube videos. I don't need that type of quality when I'm making YouTube videos. The camera I'm shooting this with, or the other HDV camera, or my little cheap $200 special, is plenty good enough for shooting YouTube videos. But for some of the videos I've got planned, which will end up on YouTube anyway, they'll be in 4K. When I do some traveling, I'm going to be shooting stuff with this and so forth. So anyway, that's my production cameras that I've got here. Just give you a little insight of what I've got, what we're shooting with. And if you're looking to buy a camera to make YouTube videos with, there's lots of choices out there. If you're looking for a really good all-around camera for shooting just about everything, and you can find one of these, this is quite a large camera, but if you can find one of these at a good price, I would say go with this, even though it uses a tape. There are some very good strengths to using tape. And in the past, when I've had to shoot something which was critical that I got it, and I'm talking a once only event, such as a wedding, which I used to do every weekend pretty much, and I wanted to make sure that I was getting it and I didn't have to worry about losing it, I always trusted it to good old magnetic tape. This stuff's been around for 50 years or more, and it's reliable. Even if the camera malfunctions while I'm on a shoot, what I've already recorded is in the can. All I gotta do is find another player to play it back. The big downside to shooting with these things is that, and it's happened to me before, it can be gone in a blink of an eye. I had a malfunction of a camera a couple of years ago when I was on vacation. There was a strike of lightning that was really close to where I was, and the electrostatic discharge wiped my memory cards, actually destroyed my memory cards. The camera still worked, just the memory cards that I had could not be read, they could not be formatted. I tried and tried, I lost everything that was on them. It fried the memory card. So I learned that from that experience, that these things here, your memories can be gone in a blink of an eye. When you record on tape, as long as you have something to play that tape on, you're good. And tapes will last. I've got tapes that are 30 years old and they still play. So that's another thing that to consider. If you've got something that you want to make sure that you're going to have a backup copy, you can't beat the good old proven tape format. Anyway, happy shooting. We'll catch you in the next one.